idea
Well,
of Robert Parrish with an intense stream like that.
I mean, this happened just recently, but I remember distinctly where I was, what time of day it was, what I was doing at the time when I heard this. I was washing my car in the front yard on a hot summer day when you broke out with this. But this just happened again, and the look that my wife gives me from the passenger seat was just like, what is wrong with you?
I know. No, it's
and don't get me wrong. She's very supportive. She loves me and everything that I love. But every once in a while, I think it's very important to feel that kind of pain again.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we prepare you. The only thing worse than letting us make you laugh like that is having to explain it. It's just
God.
Yeah, it's just like wrestling, right? It's like the only thing worse than like being ashamed to be a wrestling fan is having to, explain why you're a wrestling fan. It's why so often wrestling fans find themselves in polite company, not even mentioning that they like wrestling. I mean, how many times in your life has wrestling come up in conversation and you act like you don't watch it?
That's right. I don't.
Or you don't snatch that opportunity to, bogart the conversation because you know so much about it. Like your instinct is actually to tiptoe away from it because you know how ludicrous it is that you enjoy something that everyone considers, basically like you have to be disabled to like really like developmentally challenged to love it. I mean, look, I've been going to wrestling my whole life. There are a lot of people with Down syndrome at wrestling shows. There are a lot of people that are like underdeveloped there. Yeah. And it's like, it's because it's such a simplistic, I think it's such a simplistic presentation. It's so visual and it doesn't take a whole lot of cognitive power to actually follow it. It's very much a universal language. And because it's fake, these guys can do patterns, right? Things look predictably in a comforting way. They play out in a similar kind of rote fashion. And, you have to realize when you're a wrestling fan that's what most people think of when they think of a wrestling crowd, and you have to fight that. Who the hell wants to fight that if you have the choice, or if there's no payback to fighting that battle? And that's the shame and pain we talk about.
Right. Shame.
Yeah. I mean, my interpersonal relationships have always been, there's a timeline, right? It's like, well, if we're together for X amount of time, then you're going to learn that I'm a fan of this thing. And and this has changed through the years, how do I explain to you why I'm a fan of this? For the longest time, it was very much just I'm a fan, but I'm not like, I don't care who wins or loses. What I really care about is how they're telling the story and like what's going on behind the scenes. And like I subscribe to this newsletter, right?
You sound so much worse. You sound so much more pathetic.
Right.
You know what I mean?
That's just it. And
she would rather you say you think it's real.
It's probably true.
I don't doubt it one bit, but it's just, that pain that we all share is very pertinent, very right at the front.
It's still real. Okay. Like when I have friends who, when they find out, oh, you're doing a podcast. I'm like, yeah, I do a podcast. And they're like, oh my God, I want to listen. What is it? I'm like, yeah, you're probably not going to listen. No. I'll listen.
Here we go.
Yeah. It's like, I'll listen. What is it? I said, well, okay. It's called The Lapsed Fan. Oh, awesome. What's it about? Professional wrestling. Oh, yeah. I'm not going to listen.
You talk for how long about wrestling?
Yeah, right. Exactly. That I don't even with friends. I don't even get that far. I don't even have to get that.
How about
far.
this? I talk as long about wrestling as your mom spent in my bedroom yesterday.
And there we are, back to your mom jokes, which used to
7 hours.
So many.
Oh my God!
So my mom was my mom in your bed for 7 hours?
Yeah, we didn't know where she was. There was a bolo out. 6 counties were informed. An Amber Alert went out, and she's 80, so that was weird. Mike Tyson got involved. It's bizarre.
Austin?
Yeah. There was some definite tappage.
But, why do you like it? Look, show them Ultimate Warrior Randy Savage, WrestleMania 7, with Elizabeth reuniting with Savage at the end, and if they don't get it then, never try to explain it again.
Yeah, that's valid. Speaking of Mrs. Sarro, I think that ties in very well here as well. That's a relatively new development on the show, and we'll talk about. We'll get further into things, but just between us, I and everybody that's listening, it's the greatest thing because it's every single mother in the history of professional wrestling and fandom.
For the longest time, so there have been times when, for whatever reason, I need to watch a show for the Laughs fan, and either, we're visiting my parents or they're down, visiting us and visiting our kid, and I got to watch a show, and my mom's there and she's watching, and she will make some absurd comment and just kind of like, oh, why is he punching like that? I thought it was supposed to be wrestling. Why are they punching? Stuff like that. And I had the idea, we live in New York, and New York is not necessarily the most fun place to be in a pandemic. There's not a lot of places to breathe. So we left. We came back up to New Hampshire to be with my parents for the time being because they have, a yard. And so she was there a couple times just watching with me. She's in the room, and I'm like, I got to record this. I needed to record this because this is some of the funniest shit I have ever heard. And,
what I think makes it especially effective, though, is your incredibly natural response to the questions that she's asking, because the answers that you give to her are exactly the answers that all of us would give, including the brief hesitation before the answer. Like, at some point, I think she says, it's something with the Steiner brothers, and you're explaining that they're brothers. And she says something like, well, they don't look like each other. And you go, yeah, well, he just wears those things. And he's talking about the ear, the head gear that Rick wears. It's just this little slice of reality.
And there's also, there think about the layers too of this, because it's not just that, but then she asks a question, and I'm like, oh God, if I answer this, everyone's going to be hearing it too. Oh shit. All right. I'm also taking consideration how of my own appearance to the listeners of the Laps fan. And that, of course, then I'm like, oh yeah, then I got to be an idiot and I got to say shit like this. And I got to tell my mom that it's entertainment, and
oh yeah,
they're telling stories and stuff like that.
They're telling stories. That was a really good one.
And she's like, what do you mean?
Exactly. What do you mean? Because as soon as the next time someone explains to me what telling stories means in wrestling will be the first time that it makes sense. Next time someone says something resonant, like, what do you mean telling stories? Like, what the fuck are you talking about? One guy's trying to win, the other guy doesn't want to let him win. That's the only story. And sometimes there's personal backdrop but the whole pursuit should be to win, 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 like any other sport. Does anybody ask what the story is around the fucking Super Bowl? They tell the story, but you know what I mean? Nobody says, like, where's the story here? Unless you're, I guess, in an editorial meeting somewhere at CBS Sports. But it's just so weird that, like, to your point, Gabe, wrestling fans are sort of saddled with this responsibility to explain what is inherently interesting about wrestling. And it's no different than anything else anybody watches on TV, but because they aren't really trying to hurt each other, people they short circuit. They can't put it in the same category as everything else.
Well, it all comes back to pain. And that's another piece of language from the show that I think resonates with all of us that have been listening for a long time, is how everything comes back to pain. Whether it's a joke or whether you're being serious, everything comes back to pain. So talk about the importance of pain, first of all. But then give me a little bit of the history there, because I know that this is another one of those that goes way back between the two of you.
This is all. The boss man I just tell him to just talk about pain, and I just sit back. Like, why is pain important, boss? Like, why is pain the only reality?
Well, pain is the only reality. Well, here's the thing about pain that you got to understand is that pain, we can't exist without pain. Okay. Pain is what keeps us sharp. Pain is what keeps us focused. We need that pain. pain is good. When we hurt, we succeed. And when we succeed, we hurt more.
That's exactly right. We think we're pursuing. We think we're just one more bit of pain away from a painless existence.
No, you have to hurt. It has to feel like pain.
Right. If it doesn't feel like pain, you are literally not moving.
That's right. You're one of those idiots that walk around smiling, thinking they're having a decent life. There's no such thing.
See, that's what I mean. Electrify me, boss, you motherfucker. The time is now. This isn't a game.
I'm just waiting for the comments on
oh my God.
Apple Podcasts about this being a college podcast. So
that's right. That's
keep
right.
Laughing it up, boys.
Yeah. They laugh at their own jokes. Well, dude, if you don't laugh at your own jokes, then we are off to a bad start in what we call
who's
life.
Funny? If you can't laugh at your own jokes, what the hell do you find funny?
We went to college with plenty of those joyless, aspiring stand-up comedians who are so proud of their ability to be funny that they can't laugh at anybody else. And I'll tell you, those are the people that I would throw overboard first if I had to.
I want to cover one more piece of language before we move on. We covered in that ass. We covered pain. What we haven't covered yet is something that personally I think is my favorite part of the program, and that's postmodernism. Look,
break boundaries here.
There are.
Are there any post-modernity podcasts out there? I should look up one.
Yeah, there are plenty.
I know of one, and I listen to it regularly.
I should have known when he said, let's talk about language, that we would end up here.
Of course, Barth, Brecht.
The nature of language.
So,
the nature of thought. The nature of nature. Oh, now we're talking.
The thought of thought.
Yes. Ooh.
Look, I want you to kind of riff a little bit on this with me here, because can first of all, you're talking to a bunch of wrestling fans, okay? and look, I'm not going to sugarcoat this.
I know.
I feel like and maybe a handful, let's say 20% of the audience knows what you're talking about. But there is a significant amount of people in your audience that have absolutely no clue what it is you're talking about when you go on postmodernist rants about.
We have introduced quite a few people to Bertolt Brecht.
This is what I wanted to get into. I can't imagine the amount of people that have gone out and learned about postmodernism.
I hope so.
Because of you guys talking about it on a professional fucking wrestling podcast.
Well, wrestling is postmodern.
Wrestling is the definition of postmodernity.
But nobody would have thought. That's one of the things. That's why it's my favorite thing, is because it's what's the word I'm looking for? It sneaks under the skin.
Right.
And all of a sudden you're Googling postmodernism and you fall down a 4-hour Wikipedia hole.
Right.
Postmodernity transcends as well as juxtaposes.
Juxtaposes. Because see, there's modernism, and then there's that which occurs after modernism.
Right. There's the modern age, and then there is that beyond the modern age. Post.
The age of ism. You know where this comes from, Gabe? It comes from Emerson.
Oh,
I assumed. Yeah.
It comes from being in the belly of that beast where, like, people will latch on to something like postmodernism because it excuses them from having to do all the reading.
And it excuses them. It excuses them for having to actually come up with an answer
to reach conclusions. Exactly.
Right.
To just stew in the gray instead of try to figure out the black and white, which is what we're on this earth to do. Is not just to say everything's up for interpretation, but to figure out where in that interpretation we can plant a flag. But postmodernism encourages people to wallow in that middle ground. Whenever you hear someone say narrative, that's a very popular word now. People usually use it because they're trying to, like, They're trying to convince you that you've been brainwashed, so they'll use the word narrative. That's